Hi guys, welcome to this this quick look at Dino Cattaneo's T-45 Goshawk. I say quick, it'll probably take 10-15 minutes all told, the video. And it's going to be in three pieces. It's going to be have a look at the aircraft in terms of how it's drawn, how it looks, its appearance and some of the systems. It's going to have a quick look at some of the paperwork, the documentation that comes with it. And I know it sounds really dull and boring, and for a lot of aircraft it is. But considering this is a freeware aircraft, it just has to be seen to be believed what Dino's done with this. Quite remarkable, and as I say, I've been so impressed by it. It's amazing, almost as impressed as I am with the actual aircraft itself. So that's the first thing, the second thing, and then the third thing. Finally, we'll have a look at how this thing flies. Now, the external model. This is done by a guy for freeware. This is not payware. I think you can donate through his website, but it's not payware. So for him to put the time and effort into this is amazing, quite frankly. And it doesn't just stop at how it looks, but we'll have a quick look at how it looks. It's got the tie-down points, for example. It's got the actuator arms for the undercarriage. It's got the split rim style wheels that aircraft have. It's got the vortex generators on the leading edge. It's got the flap and aileron actuating housings here. It's got the exhaust e-fluxes for various ports on the engines. It's got the steps that you can get in and out of the aircraft with. It's actually got animated steps, which is just superb. It's got about 8 or 9 different paint schemes it comes with. It's got the drop-down carrier arm that you can see there. One of the most impressive things that I've come across is that, well, let's just chuck all the lights on, and you can see all the lights in their full glory. Beautiful bit of kit. Beautiful bit of kit. Landing light there with a bit of flare. All of the various lights around it. Now, I don't know if you noticed as we were moving around there, the engine noise changes. Brilliant. Almost quiet, almost silent. Abeam the aircraft, which you'd expect because you've got your jet influx here and your reflux there. And you notice how the noise changes as you go around. Superb. You've got good animation of the flying controls all round. You've got some lovely effects, like you can see the sheen from the sunlight reflecting on the aircraft. Let's just get rid of the close the canopy as well. You can see the light reflection on the canopy here. The visual modelling for one person is crazy. It's better than some payware aircraft, and I think if you paid £10-15 for this aircraft, you wouldn't be particularly disappointed. I've only just noticed that as well. You've got the stall promotion strips here at the leading edge, and basically what these do is disrupt the airflow over the wing to give the pilot a bit of feedback in terms of buffeting. When I had a read of the pilot notes, it does say there's very little indication of approaching the stall with these things. Lovely little touches. Bring the speed brakes out. You can see that there are holes within it, just like the real thing, but you can actually see, as you move the speed brakes, you can see what's behind it. It is clear and translucent. Obviously for carrier deck operations, you've got your tie-down points, you've got your strengthened undercarriage. Compared to the aircraft it's designed from, or based on, the Hawk, I mean the body, if I were to take the undercarriage out, some of the nose profiling out, and some of the tail profiling with the arrestor hook and the ventral strake there, you'd be hard pushed to say it's from anything other than the British Aerospace Hawk. The canopy modelling's great. It's got the miniature detonation cord in the canopy. Superb stuff. Right, quick look inside. Yeah, does exactly what it says on the tin, but it does have some really nice features which a lot of freeware aircraft don't have, and some payware aircraft don't have. Now, not everything in here is clickable, but a lot of things are. So you've got your fuel cock, your start-stop, you've got your rudder trim, control augmentation. I haven't actually found out what that does, but you've got your fuel control, normal and manual. You've got your throttle, obviously, your flaps here. Even some of your dials, like your hydraulics, hide 1, hide 2, and your brakes here. You can see they're 3D, and you know, for me, that's things like that are a big thing. They add a lot to the visual appearance of the model. Having been in a Hawk, I was really fortunate in the military. I got about 50 hours in a Hawk, so you can even arm the ejector seat. I got about 50 hours in the Hawk itself. And you get to see effects like this. I mean, this is obviously where he's managed to take a photograph and he's managed to blend the photorealistic elements in, because you do get this kind of worn away effect where there's no paint anymore on the metal. So you've got a good radio stack there, you've got your sort of electrical panels here in terms of your ADF, your nav set. You do have nav on this, civilian nav, not just TACAN. You've got your main radio set there for it can do VHF with standby. Quite nice, nice features here. All very nice. And then you've got your other nav and comms radios down here. Another comms radio, COM2. You've got all your various transponder settings down here. So this is your transponder. Now I don't think any of these are clickable. So I think if you're on VATSIM, I don't know if you can actually use that. But there we go. Main panel with AC reset 1 and 2. You've got your batteries, you've got your lights, and then down here you've got all your other lights. So there's your cabin lights, and these are all your other lights here. The two bits of kit that impress me the most are the heads-up display, which I'll talk about in a second, and down here these two displays. You've got an attitude and direction indicator, and you've got your HSI, and these are very pretty, but they're also functional. So if I start pressing buttons along the side, you can see I can go to an ADI on the left instead. I can go back to my HSI. The HSI can display airports, it can point out it can have my flight plan on it, it can have NDBs, so local NDBs flash up. There's the Innsbruck one, India November. Autopilot, so I can turn it on, get the warning when I turn it off. Heading mode, GPS mode, alt hold. I can then also turn around and say if I want to adjust my heading, I click it onto heading, and I can adjust my heading bug. So I can use my scroll wheel to do it as well. So let's just go around here just for the sake of playing around with it. There's my course, there's my heading. I can go into the menu, I can get my engine details out of it. I mean, yeah, what more is there to say other than awesome? You know, it's just turn it off, turn it on, play around with it as much as you want, really. So that's the first bit. Quite impressed with that. That really makes me a happy boy. If I then go up, you've got this sort of heads-up display. You've got the head-up display, which is lovely. It's got the 2 layers of glass. You have 2 layers of glass and head-up display for the image to be relayed to the pilot. But not only that, this interacts, so you can turn it off and on, you can turn it, change colour, you can put it into a day and night mode, you can declutter it, you can add things like the heading, so your course and heading modes, bingo fuel, you can set your bingo fuel look, you can change the mode, so you can have different modes, you can have basic, you can have various, I haven't read the details fully as to what the modes are. I haven't tried this before, but let's have a quick look at this. Okay, so let's just choose a heading. Let's choose west. So let's go heading 270, enter. And there's nothing to see on there, but when I look down here, look, my heading bug's at 270. So if I was flying an ILS of 189, so let's do course 189, enter. Whoa, look at that, that's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. So you've now got a head-up control panel that works with your HSI. Fantastic. So, yeah, nothing more to say inside this aircraft really, other than the HUD looks great, the buttons work lovely, it's very intuitive, the screens are marvellous, and it just is a very pretty place to be. This review, this opinion of mine, wouldn't really be complete without having a quick look at the documentation. Now, a lot of freeware aircraft, they're designed by and created by people working either individually or as part of a very small team with the data that they can get available to hand. And they do an admirable job, but there's a physical restriction to what they can get hold of. There's some freeware aircraft don't even come with any documentation, and there's payware aircraft that come with a lot less than that. But there's quite a few things that make this really rather excellent or exceptional. The first thing is if you look at the layout of it, even in terms of describing what the mission is, and then the diagrams of the cockpit and the panel and the instruments, absolutely first class. And you know, you could be forgiven for thinking, well, compared to some of the stuff that comes out with some of the payware manufacturers like PMDG, etc. You know, it's black and white, it's plain, it's got schematics, it's not laid out, it's not got hyperlinks, it's not. Let me assure you that in a 1980s or 1990s manual, when you're reading from an aircrew perspective about the systems of an aircraft, this is how it's set out. There's no glitz, no glamour. This is just what you know, what you see is what you get. And it comes with the general arrangements that you would expect to see. They come with these nice little Gucci diagrams in the pilot's operating manuals, just so that you know what each bit is, as if you didn't already know what a speed brake was. But it's all there. This is what the actual textbooks look like. Now, the systems descriptions, chapter 2. If you want to know all of the individual systems to a reasonable level, I mean, look at the state of that. That is just awesome. That is just awesome. The diagrammatic sequencing of the engine fuel system, just brilliant. And so basically, if you want to know pretty much everything that you would need to know as a flight simulator pilot, but you want to know it in a military style, this is where you come. A couple of useful things in it that demonstrate the attention to detail. Down here you've got the usable fuel, standard 59-degree day. Now, military aircraft are graded for using different sorts of fuels, because on an aircraft carrier there's different fuels, there's more than one fuel, and those different fuels all have different capabilities in terms of being used in the aircraft. So you've got JP5, JP4, JP8, and one of them might be used in gas turbines for electrical supplies on whatever warship. One of them might be used for running diesel engines, and one of them might be used as the primary choice of jet fuel, kerosene or whatever for the aircraft. But obviously they're interchangeable, so you've got a preferable one, I would assume, by the order. It's probably going to be JP5. But you have a preferable one. The only thing is that each one obviously has a different density, and therefore when you fill your 443 gallon tank, it's a different weight, and obviously that affects your calculations for your takeoff and performance data. So it does go to that depth. The reality is that you're not going to be working that out, but it does demonstrate the absolute joy that is the documentation that has been written down here. So we go page after page after page, all of the information for the displays, all the information for the HUD, absolutely brilliant. Now, not all of this is going to be replicated. There are sections in here where it basically says, you know, due to the limitations of FSX, we can't do that. So yeah, I mean, if you want to know how to get in and out of a T-45 Goshawk, there you go. There's your answer. Page 36. And the ejector seat and how it works ejecting, and the information for all of the various systems if you want to service it, jet danger areas, jet noise areas, turning circles, how to tie it down to an aircraft carrier. If you want to know that, it's there. It's not in the sim, but the information's there for a point of interest. Now, we do get into the meat of things we might want to know, operating limitations. Landing gear, maximum limit is less than or equal to 200 knots, same with flaps and slats. Arrestor hook you can have down up to 450 knots. Canopy limits are there, tyres, ground speed limits, nose wheel steering and fuel system. Shore-based procedures. Now this is where it becomes quite relevant. Now you've got the pre-flight inspection exterior, which, you know, not a lot we can do about that with a walk round. But it does then go through the full checklist on entering the cockpit. Now it does say that there are areas where FSX cannot meet the same elements of the checklist. So it says written in italic and identified as not applicable, no relevant function even if you can click it. So here's one: cockpit air conditioning, normal or as required, all in italics. Nothing you can do there, it's just not simulated. But I'm fine with that, considering I have to pay absolutely £0 to get this thing. I'm good, you know, this is far more than I would have expected. So all the way down you've got your temperatures. Key thing here for military pilots, you haven't got a lot of space in a military pilot's cockpit, but you're more advanced than your average simple single engine Cessna. So with a Cessna you would have, say, a landing speed and an approach speed and a takeoff speed, and they're all set on the assumption that you're flying the aircraft on the worst possible day with the worst possible handling with the maximum weight. So it gives in that fudge factor that you're not too close to the limits. But you can't do that with military aircraft. But likewise, you can't carry around tables full of charts like you would in an airliner. So they work on very simple premises. So let's assume we're doing a full flaps landing, and you'll notice there is an almost direct linear correlation here. Starting at £11,000, 114 knots. Add £1,000, add another 5 knots to 119. Add £1,000, add another 5 knots to 124. Slight variation here. Add another £1,000 to 14. Add another 4 knots. But then we go back to our routine of 5. So at £15,000, you would add you'd total 133 knots. So basically, you as a pilot, you would know what your gross weight at takeoff was, and your fuel load. So say you had 2,000 pounds of fuel, and your gross takeoff weight was 13,000. When you get down to 1,000 pounds of fuel, you know you're at 1,200 pounds, so you know you need 119 full flaps indicated airspeed for approach. So all very well and good. So yeah, there's a lot of really good information in here that's just excellent. Takeoff profile, not really that hard in a fast jet. Open the throttle, check your power, off you go, pull back, landing gear up, flaps and slats up, and off you go. Job done. Not quite as complex as an Airbus A320, but there we go. Landing approach, and then we get into carrier-based procedures. If you've got FSX acceleration, then this is the kind of thing that you need to add on to your knowledge. How to land on a carrier. Very much more complex, but that's what you'd expect. Right, welcome back, guys. Into the cockpit. We're just going to get airborne now. A couple of things. We can put our first stage flaps down while we're waiting. Couple of things. Being a military aircraft, it has a flaps and gear cleanup speed of 200 knots, and that comes about fairly quickly after takeoff. So you don't go climbing away necessarily with lots of flaps stages for very long. However, it needs to be pointed out that this is, compared to say an F-14 or an F-16 or something like that, this is a relatively modest powered jet engine. Now the aircraft can go quite fast, but it hasn't quite got the acceleration of one of the front line fighters, although this in theory could be used as a frontline fighter, but it hasn't got a radar, so in reality you probably wouldn't. So the ground handling is nothing to be surprised about, other than the fact that my Cytec rudder pedals need their null point adjusting and their sensitivity adjusting. So that's pilot induced oscillation, nothing to do with the model of the aircraft. Here we go, 100 knots coming up. It's quite a short runway for an aircraft like this. Going to rotate about 130 to 135, there we go, and up we go. Clean up the gear. Make sure that's going up. Yes, it is. Nice animation for that. And let's get rid of the flaps now that we're above 175. So, if you're going to fly a military fighter aircraft in something like FSX, one of the key things you're going to want to know about more than anything else is the handling. You know, these things aren't put on the earth for moving passengers around. It's only got one spare seat. It's not moving cargo. And really, unless you want to, for some strange and twisted reason, it's not really designed for you to go out and practice your ILSs. It's designed to go out and fly like a fighter, for which we're going to fly like a fighter. So there's a couple of places where it's really good to test the handling of an aircraft. One is in formation. The other one is low-level flying. So there we go, nice warning to tell us that we're getting a bit too low, which is deliberate. That's what we want to be doing. So what's the handling like? Well, it's just a joy to fly. I did fly the Hawk for about 50 hours 20 years ago, and I remember it being a beautiful aircraft to fly, very well coordinated, very nice, and it flattered the pilot greatly. It really did. It made my ham-fisted attempts at aviation look quite respectable. And this pretty much does the same thing. And the whole joy of a training aircraft sometimes is the fact that it's easy to fly but hard to master. It's a comment that's often been said about things like the Spitfire, but with the Hawk they said the same thing, and I think even though I haven't flown a T-45, I think the characteristics of flying this thing lend themselves very well to that saying. So, you know, this thing really is great to fly. We're doing nearly 500 knots. I'll just take the power off and we'll go back over this ridge onto the other side. Don't want to black out. These things, certainly the Hawk is capable of between 9 and 9.5 G in short periods. So let's go back down and follow the river where we came from. There it is. Get back down to some low-level shenanigans. So here we are, bit of low-level flying. Fantastic looking thing. Zoom out a bit and you can get the effect of speed over the ground. You can get the effect of the control rates, which are nicely coordinated. So I can see Innsbruck in the distance there. Bit of rain, nothing too much to worry about. Let's just go and beat it up, and then we'll do a landing from the other side. So really, there's not much to criticise about this, and I think if I had paid £10–15 for it as a payware aircraft, it would, for me that's the right price point. You can buy light product airliners, for example, where half the switches are inactive because it's not needed for the. In fact, I've just noticed that. Look at that in the canopy reflections of the inside of the aircraft all over here. Beautiful, really nice touches. Yeah, if you were to buy a light aircraft, I don't know, a 757 light, 737 light, whatever's available. I think there's an Airbus as well. Half of the dials and switches are inactive. Yes, you just want to beat up an airfield with this thing. This thing's great. So this is no different to that. The handling characteristics are an absolute joy. It's a hoot to fly around and have some fun. And what we're going to do now is we're going to position ourselves for a landing, and we're going to really do it Top Gun styley. We're going to get ourselves some distance from the airfield, and we're going to see if we can have a go at this. Now, let's see, about 4 to 4.5 G is what we used to pull for a loop when I was messing around in them. Obviously gone a bit too much if we're greying out. Watch the throttle because the engine was overspeeding a bit there. As we come over the top, it's the middle marker, my mistake. There's the airfield, fully off the power so we don't accelerate at a great rate of knots. We'll put the speed brake down because we're well below the speed limit for operating the speed brake. Now there's in the bottom of the HUD, you can see there's like a little circle with lines out the top and the sides. That's a flight path vector. That tells you where if you did nothing, where you're going to go. So we would hit that housing estate short of the runway. We're looking for 2 reds, 2 whites. We're aiming low because what we're going to do is lift the nose up in a bit and bleed off the speed. The speed is gradually coming off, but I can't put gear and flaps down till 200 knots because of the nature of the aircraft. But I've also got to remember to take the speed brake back in, otherwise we're going to have a lot of fun towards the end. So quite often you potentially land with part speed brake anyway. There we go. The speed will come off quite quickly now. Potentially you'd have part speed brake anyway because it allows you to have the engine at a higher throttle setting. Speed brake's coming in now. And what that then means is that you can have a quicker response from the engines. Doesn't have any drag chutes, doesn't have any reverse thrust, doesn't have any Gucci gear like that. It does have a tail hook, but we're not using that. So it's just down to manual braking now, and we came in quite fast, 140 knots, so it's going to be tight, but we'll see if we get to stop before the end of the runway. So in summary, should you go out and get the aircraft? Well, it's free. What have you got to lose? I would suggest go to Dino's website. I think you can donate for it, which I think would be marvellous to support him. I know he does this, he does an F-14, and I think he does one more aircraft, and he's got one in development. And he's consistently updating these things, so it must take him a lot of time to do so. So I would certainly consider donating for it. So that's the first point to make. Free, nothing to lose, you can always donate, and I think it's worth doing so. The second thing is, I think there are a lot of payware aircraft who don't meet this standard. I've been impressed recently. I think you've probably seen the review I've done on the Just Flight Chipmunk. I think that's very nicely modelled and very well done for its price point. It's a long time since I flew a Chipmunk. It's also in fact it's longer since I flew a Chipmunk than a Hawk. But the Hawk certainly holds a soft spot because it's the only fast jet aircraft, certainly military fast jet aircraft, I've had the joy of flying in real life. And in the absence of being able to find what I think is a really good Hawk model, I think there's a couple out there that are freeware, and I think there's also a Hawk being developed for DCS, for the DCS world. But in the absence of that, this thing is an absolute hoot, a real blast, and I would suggest that it's worth going out and getting it just for that alone. And with that thought, I'll leave you guys and I'll speak to you soon.